Let me guess, you're very interested in the competitive side of Riftbound, but you haven't watched a single competitive game yet. Don't worry, I got you covered. In this video we're going to explore the evolution of the competitive meta through the story that is being told during the Chinese Riftbound Regional Opens. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Sol and I've been a professional player in Legends of Runeterra for its entire competitive life. And now Riot Games did it again and hooked me with another amazing card game. In this video we're going to be looking at 4 different subsequent tournaments that shaped the meta of Riftbound more than anything else. The Call to Glory was insane in China. The first tournament had 500 slots and more than 4,000 people tried to join. A bit of a miscalculation by Riot here. Let's start by looking at the first one that took place in Guangzhou. Riftbound has been available for purchase for roughly a couple of weeks in China. The time for testing has been low and I imagine that it wasn't easy for most of the players to put their hands on every single card they needed. Anyway, in the West we played a lot of Riftbound thanks to the online simulators, and this tournament was pretty close to what we expected. Master Yi and Kai'Sa were the top tier decks, with the most entries followed up by Victor. A thing we didn't expect was that almost 30 people brought Teemo and did pretty well with him. Another surprise was that Volibear, Set and Darius had very few entries in the tournament, while many people brought Jinx, which is known as a weak deck here in the West. Now, before we move to how the games played out and to the top 8 itself, I'm another guy. I'm an engineer. I know it's hard for some people, I'll do my best to leave the data there for those who like reading them and not talk too much about them. But they are very interesting, so do your best as well to follow them, because if you want to get good at card games, a bit of understanding in statistics is pretty important. Follow me, it takes less than 30 seconds, and let's take Master Yi as an example. The table on the right measures how many people brought the deck. So there were 137 IE decks on day 1, that represented the 27.1% of the field on day 1, which is a lot. 18 of them had good results and converted to day 2. 18 is the 13.14% of 137, meaning that roughly 13% of those who brought Master Yi managed to win enough games to get to play on day 2, which is pretty good. As you can see on the left, the top 8 was pretty various, except for Kai'Sa, which took 4 spots. I've watched the entirety of the Chinese broadcast and the skill level of day 1 was reasonably low. The game was brand new and there were plenty of misplays and mistriggers even by the judges. It was a very fun broadcast and the play level was just as expected. In this low skill landscape, Master Yi thrived a lot, because his playstyle is incredibly easy and punishes misplays very hard. The Master Yi player simply sits on a battlefield and doesn't stop holding it for the entirety of the game. If you are not good enough to track, bait and outsmart the many possible reactions he has on top of Master Yi's passive, you're just going down in very few turns. Even in the frequent mirror matches of day 1, they ended up being the AI that starts the game, wins the round, because he simply is unmovable from the first battlefield he starts holding. The only decks that took down AI consistently were Kai'Sa and Misfortune, in 2 different ways. Kai'Sa exploited the enormous power of cheap shooting spell she has, in order to take down AI's unit without giving AI the value of its passive, in order to win the value game in the long run. At the same time, Misfortune played the bigger numbers game, and the only version of the deck that actually thrived and won consistently was in fact the Dazzling Aurora one, a cheeky deck that wants to ramp and draw as much as possible, ignoring its opponent until Aurora hits the field. At this point, MF starts dominating the game with the value provided by Dazzling Aurora, combined with the insanely strong when I enter the battlefield effects that each unit in the deck has. Those things were probably Victor's problem during the tournament. He was by far the worst converting deck, with only 8 people reaching day 2 among the original 100. The reason is that he has a very bad matchup against Kai'Sa. He might win against Yi, but he has to play way better than his opponent in order to do that. And probably not many Victor brought Salvage in their side, in order to counter Dazzling Aurora, making the Misfortune matchup way harder. At the end of the tournament, Kai'Sa won, but it wasn't just the fact that she got the first place. She had 4 spots in top 8, and was the best converting deck overall by far. Those are the things that good players look at and that will influence the following days of testing and tournaments. Let's move to Beijing. We are just 1 week after Guangzhou, and Kaisa and AI are clearly what you're supposed to play if you want to win consistently. And by the way, people want to win. In theory, there is no cash prize on the line in this tournament, but the unique misfortune cards won by the top 4 the previous week were already being sold in the West for thousands of dollars. So we are definitely playing for money here. A thing I forgot to mention before is that Day 2 in Guangzhou was way different than Day 1. The broadcasted players knew what they were doing, underlining that maybe the wide field wasn't that high level, but good players exist and they are interested in Riftbound. The Day 2 skill level was significantly higher. In Beijing, Day 1 was impressive. Except for the first couple of broadcasted games, the Swiss games were pure fire. The broadcast direction improved, and they showed matches of different cool decks. For example, we had a combo Yasuo which was piloted masterfully by its player. But in general, the feeling was the ceiling is getting higher. Speaking of decks, a new Rising Challenger appeared, and his name is Sett. His natural playstyle counters Kaisa directly, and has a fair fight against current AI decklists. Ahri is slowly going up in popularity and in conversion rate, while Victor, Timo and Jinx are probably not winning enough to even be considered tier 2. The Day 2 of Beijing was the disaster of the current meta. A perfect 4-4 split on the top 8, and Kaisa is the uncontested queen of the meta, with a conversion rate of over 20% once again, while basically every other deck except for Riot and Sett had a lower conversion compared to Guangzhou. I personally said it's a disaster while watching and casting the Day 2, because this is not the top 8 you want to see in any card game. It surely happens, but it generally isn't a good sign. But don't worry, things are about to change. Let's go to Chongqing. Everything we said for Beijing is still true. Kaisa and AI stand on top, while Misfortune consolidates as the best tier 2 deck. Sett keeps gaining momentum, and a new incredible Any aggro list appeared that aims to finish games with the Vire the Wind combo. Her main threat is Kaisa, but she has an easy matchup into Master Yi. Darius and Victor Chinese decklists are not working, probably because good deck builders are not picking them up. I assure you that they are a pretty good deck right now. And voila! I know, this is not the top 8 you expected when I said that things are about to change, but hear me out. The top 8 doesn't tell you the whole story. At this point, a player out of 3 is playing Kaisa, which is insane. That makes her the big bad guy everybody wants to take down. And in fact, she has been taken down by roughly 10% of conversion rate compared to Beijing. That's the real change. People are adapting to Kaisa's playstyle. More and more decklists run by default cards that hate on Kaisa, like Unyielding Spirit, and eventually they side them out on game 2 if they are not against Kaisa. Another interesting fact is that all the AI decklists that reach the top have a new peculiar strategy that plays ramping cards along with Deadbloom Predator with Testy Feefolk, with the purpose to propel them to those late game plays that make Kaisa sweat in order to win. In this landscape where AI tends to slow down in order to beat Kaisa, we move to Hangzhou for our last step of the Chinese Riftbound Regional Open. Master Yi's strategy to play slower worked out fine. How about we make it even more powerful in the late game with Dazzling Aurora? That wins against Kaisa and wins against the Master Yi that do not play Aurora. But guess what? It does lose to almost everything else. And once again, we had an extremely various and beautiful tournament to watch. Of course, AI and Kaisa still occupy half of the field, but they are beatable. If Kaisa wants to handle Aurora AI, she needs heavier cards like Mundo, Time Warp and Unchecked Power. Those cards are clogging her decklist, making her less consistent against other decks. AI is losing against faster decks like Sett, and it also loses against a particular Misfortune tech that is Possession. There are also 3 different AI deck lists that even if they are similar, the playstyle is completely different. And a new spectacular half combo Ahri list appeared that aims to prey on Aurora decks with multiple copies of Time Warp comboed with Echo and Ahri Calm. Speaking the truth here, if there are still just 2 top tier decks in the game, there are at least 5 decks that can be considered tier 2, as they can build strategies that easily take down either Kaisa or AI and match almost evenly the other one. I had the pleasure to compete for the very first time just yesterday, exactly 1 week after Hangzhou in the Italian ASCENSION League. It was a 50-player Swiss tournament online and I ended up in top 8, losing only to Annie. The Italian community is very active on Riftbound and the skill level gets pretty high after just a couple of wins in the Swiss. I am leaving the decklist you see in the description below. As always, if you liked my competitive narrative, be sure to check out my previous video, or leave a like and a follow. I'm just at the start of my international journey as a creator, so every interaction really helps. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.